So, former Los Angeles Angels GM Billy Eppler is taking over the job for the Mets, while Noah Syndergaard is heading out to Anaheim to pitch for the Angels. Weird that those two stories came within 24 hours. We're going to break down more of that on today's episode of Locked On Mets.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans who are listening to Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen every day. Locked On Mets is free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. Now, I had a guest for today's show, Taylor Blake Ward, the former host of Locked On Angels, because he covered Billy Eppler during his time with the Angels and had a lot of great things to say about him. Unfortunately, due to technological difficulties when it came to Taylor's internet, it just wasn't worth putting that out there to you guys. It would have been really choppy. So what we're going to do instead in the first segment today, I'm just going to share what Taylor told me. So I'm going to give you the information secondhand, but he had a lot of interesting tidbits about Billy Eppler that I will share with you. In the second segment, I want to talk a little bit more about the Noah Syndergaard signing with the Angels situation from a Mets perspective. We have learned a little bit more about how that process unfolded. So I want to get into that a bit. And then in the last segment, a crossover I recorded with the current host of Locked On Angels as we discuss what Noah is going to bring to Anaheim next season. Before we get to any of that, though, I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, follow me on Twitter at FinkelsteinRyan. You can also find some of my writing about the Mets at justbaseball.com. Now, I do want to shout out Taylor Blake Ward again. You should find his new book, In Search of Millionaires, The Life of a Baseball Gypsy. He essentially wrote a biography about a former big league scout with a ton of incredible stories in there. I encourage you to check out one of the most recent episodes of Locked On Padres on YouTube or on your podcast feed, as he was joined by Taylor and this scout to go through some of those stories. And also Taylor's internet was a little bit better that day, so you can check him out and see what he had to say about his book. It is really an interesting story. But let's talk about what Taylor told me when it comes to Billy Eppler, a guy he covered for 5 years. He says that Billy Eppler is a brilliant baseball mind. And anytime you're a Mets fan right now and you're learning about a new GM, that's what you want to hear. But some of the interesting things he talked about was that because Billy Eppler has a background in football as well, he sees the game of baseball differently than anyone that Taylor's ever talked to when it comes to how players are positioned, how to find space to score, just how he sees the field. It's different than your traditional solely baseball focused executive that maybe doesn't have that multifaceted background. He talked about how Billy Eppler has seen it all, done it all when it comes to the game of baseball, knowing all the different departments, scouting, player development, analytics, and he is really going to be able to come in and fill a multifaceted role at the Mets and be able to, serve a lot of different functions in that front office, which would be a really great thing. When it comes to his lack of success with the Angels, one of the things that Taylor was telling me is just that, he was really hamstrung by ownership out there in Anaheim, where he didn't always have full reign to make decisions. And for the Mets to be successful, Taylor believes that Billy Eppler is going to have to be given that type of autonomy to make decisions, to do his job. And that's what we've been talking about ever since the Steve Cohen era started. That's what I've been talking about, dating back to when I was yelling about Jeff Wilpon running the Mets. You need somebody who's atop your organization, who has the credence, who has the credibility, who has the full reign to do their job of running baseball operations without that fear of oversight, without someone stepping in and stepping on their toes. So this is going to be a make or break situation when it comes to whoever is in that role. Can Steve Cohen support his baseball ops people without getting too involved? Can Sandy Alderson really take that backseat and just be the president running the business side and not weigh in too much and not get in Billy Epler's way? That is something that is going to be curious to see how it unfolds. And we won't really know other than, I guess, watching the results. If there's too much input from too many different people and there's not a clear direction under your GM, I don't believe the Mets will be successful. So that was interesting to hear Taylor say. And some of the other things that Taylor mentioned, he talked about how Billy Epler is the reason Shohei Ohtani is an Angel. He's likely the reason that Mike Trout is still an Angel. He says he's a great communicator. He has connections all around the game, and that is great for the Mets right now. You need to shake your bad reputation around league circles. And I believe that Billy Epler, as compared to Adam Cromie, someone who was out of the game for 5 years, I think Epler is going to resonate more around the league as a good hire who will be able to work with more people, whether you're talking about trades or anything else. I just think that is an important note when it comes to this GM hire. I think that regardless of what hire the Mets had made in this situation, we were going to nitpick it. There was not going to be anybody that was going to come in at this stage of this hiring process where it would have been a slam dunk home run, where everyone would have been, all right, they did it. Hats off to Steve Cohen and Sandy Alderson. They fixed it. The Mets are in great hands moving forward, and they are set. There's no one. After the way this process unfolded, as laughable as it got, all the candidates that said no, you were just basically picking from bad options. And I think with that in mind, it makes his hire look a little bit better because at least he's someone that has a pedigree. At least he's someone that can step in right now and do the job. And one of the things that I've mentioned is you just need somebody right now who can get plugged in where you can begin your offseason. And the fact is, the Mets front office, as presently constructed, was not going to change with one hire. I said this on yesterday's show as well. One hire was not going to flip everything and suddenly turn the Mets into a completely different team with a completely different motive than it already was. This is a team that has people in place in their front office that are going to have to work with this new GM. So it was not as if here was going to be a GM hire that was going to bring in his own people and everything was going to, no, like this is a single hire that has to come in and work with the incumbents that are in place. And I think because he has that recent history as a GM, because he does have experience in New York, having come up with the Yankees under Brian Cashman, he is in a weird way the perfect hire under these circumstances. Not necessarily the perfect hire if we had scripted it from the end of the season, but if we were talking about from the last week, where the Mets stood, the disastrous situation they were in, it is as good as it could be, where you're getting an executive that, yes, has failed as a GM, but previously, if you had hired Billy Eppler 5 years ago or before he had gotten to the Angels, everyone was praising that hire. Everyone was talking about how here you go, the Angels can compete against the Dodgers now because they have Billy Eppler. And it didn't work out, but maybe second crack at it, he figures it out and he can rewrite his own narrative as an executive in this league. That's what you're hoping for, but only time is going to tell whether this was a good hire or not. And also, once again, we should mention there is still the dream scenario of David Stearns coming over next year from the Brewers to be the new president. Those two are very close. If that happens, if that is the ultimate result of all of this, at least the Mets ended up where you wanted them to be. It just would have taken them a lot longer. It would have taken them almost 3 years from the start of when Steve Cohen took over and bought the team to when you might finally get David Stearns. I guess 2 years and change. But if that happens, we will all be thrilled. We should throw a parade if they get David Stearns because you'll be in good hands. But I think for now, for this season, they're in better hands with Billy Eppler than they probably would have been with Adam Cromie. And considering those are the last two names that we've talked about, the last two front runners that there were. That's all we can judge them on right now. And I think this is going to be a hire that will at least allow the Mets to start on their offseason. And they just had to deal with a massive blow as Noah Syndergaard will not be a New York Met. Going to talk about that a bit more in just a minute. I love Thanksgiving. All the good food and treats, and dessert is always the best part of any feast. But maybe this year you want a dessert that's just not so full of calories and sugar, and it is the perfect time to try a Built Bar because Built Bar is the new holiday dessert where you can feast on something delicious but feel good about it. One slice of pie has upwards of 300 calories, and that's on the low end, whereas Built Bar, you're talking about a buck 30, only 4 grams of sugar with plenty of protein. You can replace that coconut cream pie with a coconut Built Bar or a raspberry Built Bar for that raspberry pie. There's lots of good flavors to replace any pie. Built Bars come low in calories, low in carbs, low in fat, but they are high in protein, and they come covered in 100% chocolate. There's going to be new surprises all month long with limited time flavors arriving at built.com regularly, so check out the site often. There's also nothing like a Built Bar Black Friday, so mark your calendar because Black Friday will be a massive event with all sorts of surprises. Go to built.com right now. Use the promo code LOCK15 and you'll get 15% off your next order. Again, that's promo code LOCK15 at built.com for 15% off. All right, so when it comes to Noah Syndergaard signing with the Angels, I encourage all of you to watch my breaking rapid reaction podcast that went up on Tuesday, where I discussed the fact that Syndergaard went to the Angels, no longer a Met, what it means for the Mets moving forward, why this is not the end of the world situation where they now have a chance to sign Marcus Stroman. Maybe they wouldn't have signed Stroman had Syndergaard returned. So this could still work out for the Mets, but there was a little bit of reporting that I wanted to discuss before I play the final part of the show today, where I was speaking with those Locked On Angels, and we went through what Noah is going to bring to his new franchise. And that is the fact that Noah may not have actually given the Mets the opportunity to match this offer, which I thought would have completely been a ridiculous notion based on the way Noah was talking about the Mets to the media at the end of the season, by the way that he was talking to fans and kind of teasing his return, to have suddenly flipped the script and gone out to the Angels without even asking the Mets if they wanted to match the offer. That is shocking. But sometimes reports can be misleading. So the report is that Noah did not let the Mets know that he was going to take an offer from the Angels until he was already on a plane flying out to the West Coast to take his physical. Now, if that's the case, obviously Mets fans can feel a certain way about that, and they should, because they were misled. At the same time, that could also be a situation where Sandy Alderson or whoever was leaking that to reporters maybe was just kind of covering their own backside a bit, because there could have been a conversation at the beginning of this period where the Mets extended the qualifying offer to Noah Syndergaard and made it clear to his camp that they were not going to go above that, that was their final offer, that if he was going to come back and put on a Mets uniform next season, it would have been under that qualifying offer, which is totally fair for the Mets to want to go through, to just say that's what our offer is. That's the last offer, 18.4 million. We're not going beyond that. Accept it, take it or leave it. That I'm totally okay with. But at the same time, that would explain this report, because if Noah does not feel the love from the Mets, knows that they're not going to match this offer anyway, why is he going to just bring it to their doorstep if they're just going to reject it? I don't see any scenario where the Mets would have signed Noah Syndergaard for $21 million. You can say that's a wrong decision. You can feel any type of way you want about it, but I believe the Mets looked at the situation and said, all right, if we're going to give Noah Syndergaard $18.4 million, it sets up a win-win. Either he accepts and we get him back, or he declines and we get a pick for him. So they're incentivized to not match this offer, where instead they can take the $21 million it would cost to retain him and get another starter and get Marcus Stroman back. I don't know if it's going to cost 21 a year. It might cost more like 25. But if you were going to spend 18.4 on Noah Syndergaard previously, Adding $25 million on top of that to your payroll would have been a little bit tough. Now you don't have to worry about that $18.4 million. You can just go all in on Marcus Stroman. I don't think that the Mets had any appetite at bringing him back at $21 million. So when it comes to whether he asked the Mets or didn't ask the Mets, it really doesn't matter. He got a better offer, apparently got multiple better offers to sign with other teams, multiple teams at over $20 million. And that is a credit to Noah's career prior to the injury, the great run of success he had previously with the Mets. He deserves that money. I don't think any player ever does not deserve a contract that teams are willing to give them. It's just unfortunate that it won't be with the Mets next year. So I think at this point, it might take some time for fans to get over this one, but I'll be rooting for Noah as an Angel. And in a minute here, you'll hear a breakdown of what Noah's going to bring to the Angels and a fan base that is just thrilled to have him in this crossover episode or this crossover segment I did with the host of Locked On Angels. BetOnline is back and better than ever, now featuring a new web interface for the start of the basketball season, with more props, odds, and lines available than ever before. BetOnline remains your number one spot for all the basketball and football action this season. Head to the new updated desktop or mobile website to sign up today and receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit just by using the promo code Locked On. From basketball to football, NHL, boxing, and UFC, right to your favorite Vegas casino games. Don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers available for the 2021 season. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to bet on all your favorite sports. BetOnline, where the game starts.
Joined here by Ryan Finkelstein of Locked On Mets. Been with Locked On Mets for a couple of years now and has a chance to cover Noah Syndergaard. I wanted to get your take here, Ryan. Thanks for joining us on Locked On Angels. Your initial reactions to Noah Syndergaard coming to Anaheim?
Tears. I was upset. This was surprising. I think my first reaction was, wow, he got 21 million from another team. Not that he doesn't deserve that, not that he can't certainly pitch up to that level, but I wasn't sure if there'd be another team that would be willing to not only give him more than the qualifying offer, but give up a draft pick to get Noah Syndergaard. So that was a little bit surprising. But when the Mets first offered the qualifying offer, there was this narrative out there by some that cover the team that this was an overpay. And I said, look, his market would be pretty robust if he didn't have that qualifying offer attached. And we see it right here. The Angels say, look, this is the highest upside arm on the market, maybe outside of, a Max Scherzer. So let's just scoop him up and improve our rotation. Let's spend the money now. I think it is a pretty good gamble for the Angels here.
Noah said at the end of the season that it would be hard for him to see himself not pitching in a Mets uni. I know you're going to talk about this on your episode that comes out on Wednesday as well, but what do you make of that situation now?
Yeah, I think that was why we assumed he would accept the qualifying offer. I just don't think he intended or expected to get an offer better than the qualifying offer. He was kind of campaigning to get that qualifying offer. It seemed like he was ready to come back and pitch on that qualifying offer. I'm sure he really does love the Mets. I'm sure he wanted to be back. I'm sure he brought that $21 million offer to the Mets and said, hey, match it. They declined. So I think the Mets hopefully are going to be going in a different direction and maybe bringing back Marcus Stroman with that money. I'm sure Noah does not make this decision lightly, but at the end of the day, you're talking about getting an extra $2.6 million when you haven't pitched in 2 years. You still have a chance to rebuild your value. You have a chance to play on a team that has a lot of stars and a really nice market. It's definitely a good landing spot for Noah to hopefully rebuild his value and then get, a 9-figure contract next offseason, which is what he's obviously shooting for.
It's been a while since we've seen Noah pitch in a full capacity. He came in at the end of the year, made a couple of outings, and that was about it. Had tons of setbacks with his Tommy John. Let's erase the negative side. We're trying to stay positive here as much as we can. It's been a tough couple of years in Anaheim, so we want to stay as positive as possible. Without those injuries, what are the Angels getting out of Noah Syndergaard in their rotation?
Well, I'll tell you, I recently was looking into Noah Syndergaard, comparing his career to Kevin Gausman, Robbie Ray, Marcus Stroman, the stars atop this market. his career numbers are better than a lot of those guys. His career ERA, his career xFIP. I mean, Robbie Ray strikes out more guys than Noah Syndergaard, but there was very few categories that Noah Syndergaard did not perform better than all those guys. It was just the injury concern. So you're talking about an upside that's right there with all those guys on the market, and you're not paying for a 5 or 6 year deal here where you're locked into one of those guys. And let's be honest, Robbie Ray and Kevin Gossman don't have the longest track record. So it's a really good gamble on Noah. You're talking about a pitcher that still had the velocity. We saw that this year. He wasn't throwing his breaking stuff, but he pitched 2 innings and looked pretty decent. Looked a little bit like the Noah we saw. I mean, it was essentially a glorified rehab start at the big league level at the end of a lost season, but the velocity was there. And I think the thing that people don't really appreciate with Noah Syndergaard is when he was a Met, he would have the most dominant games of any of them, even more dominant than Jacob deGrom. I've seen Noah Syndergaard throw a complete game shutout and throw like 91 pitches. I mean, he can have those days where his stuff is just that good that guys can't square him up. And sometimes he won't be getting the strikeouts because guys will be hitting weak contact and put the ball in play. So Noah Syndergaard is a great pitcher when healthy. And if you get a healthy version of him in your rotation next year, the Angels are going to be a lot better.
You brought up Jacob deGrom there, and I kind of want to stick on that point. In his 20s, now 29 years old, will be turning 30 once we hit August in the dog days. But throughout his 20s, he's kind of had to take a back seat in that Mets rotation with Jacob deGrom in front of him, and once upon a time with Matt Harvey in front of him. So do you think that Noah Syndergaard is ready to lead a staff, which he might have to do in Anaheim if the Angels can't land a bigger name?
Absolutely. I think 2016 is the perfect example of Noah Syndergaard leading a staff. That year, Jacob deGrom got hurt at the end of the season. The Mets made a playoff push with Noah Syndergaard in his second season as their ace, basically leading a rotation that had him, Bartolo Colon, and not a lot else behind them. It was Robert Gazelman. It was Seth Lugo, guys who eventually ended up in the bullpen. And they made a push, and they were the first wild card team. That season, Noah Syndergaard had an F4 over 6. The only pitcher better that year was Jose Fernandez in all of baseball. So absolutely, if Noah Syndergaard is at his best, he can lead a rotation. I think that is a lot to ask of a pitcher who's coming off 2 years of not pitching. But if he's healthy, why not?
And for you, I know a Mets guy through and through, and that's got to be tough to watch him walk. But on a broader scope for baseball, and well, I don't want to get into CBA, but broader scope baseball 2022, watching Noah Syndergaard potentially take the ball on opening day with Trout in center, Rendon at third, Walsh at first, Ohtani DHing. I mean, as a baseball fan, what does that do for you?
It's a lot of star power, and it's going to be a lot of fun to see. It's always tough to see one of the former players you're rooting for wear a different jersey, but I think it would be pretty cool if Noah Syndergaard were to be a big reason that got Mike Trout back into the playoffs, and of course Shohei now being the monster star he is. So it's a star-studded team, and then one thing I'll say is Mets fans will be rooting for Noah Syndergaard. He's not going to a team that is directly competing with the Mets in any capacity. So I think that helps a bit. It's a tough pill to swallow today, but I think by the time the season starts, he's going to have some extra fans that'll follow him out to LA.
And one more before I let you run away. We're going to talk about this in our final segment. But the now what factor of the offseason for the Angels moving forward. Already seen, I hate to be the rumors guy, but I'm going to be the rumors guy here. Stroh already tweeted about it here not too long after Syndergaard signs that contract, or reportedly pending the physical at this point. Do you think that this could be a move that potentially gets Marcus Stroman to Anaheim? I know you had mentioned that maybe they use that money in New York to bring him back to the Big Apple, but do you think maybe Noah's texting Stroman already?
Honestly, I don't think that Noah will get Stroman to Anaheim. I think $150 million will get Stroman to Anaheim.
That's a pretty, yeah, that might help.
So I think that's the bigger thing here. He is enjoying his free agency. Marcus Stroman is. He's earned that right to have his free agency. He is going to be setting up a bid from a lot of teams who can use his services. You can look at him as maybe the starting pitcher that can have the most destinations just because the floor is so high with Marcus Stroman. I think you can count on him to make 30 plus starts. He's a guy who has spent a lot of money investing in his body. He's not reliant on hard stuff, so he can age very well. We saw him just pick up a split change this year, He picked it up over the COVID period where he wasn't pitching on the actual mound, and it was a dynamic weapon. So he's going to age really well. Whoever gets Marcus Stroman is going to get a great pitcher. Hopefully that's the Mets, not the Angels, but we'll see what happens.
Hopefully it's the Angels, not the Mets. Ryan Finkelstein, thanks for joining us here today, man. Go check out Locked On Mets for more. Obviously, I know you're going to be covering it and, of course, covering everything that's going on in the offseason here. Thanks for joining us today, Ryan.
Yeah, thanks for having me. That's going to be all for today's edition of Locked On Mets. As always, thank you for listening. Make sure you follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcast. Make sure you follow me on Twitter at Finkelstein Ryan. Follow the show at Locked On Mets. On tomorrow's show, I'll be joined by Brian Wright for a Throwback Thursdays. We're going to talk about the previous GMs in Mets history. Who was the best? Who was the worst? And where will Billy Eppler eventually factor in? Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen every day. Now for your second listen, check out the Locked On Bets podcast, your one-stop shop for all your gambling needs, hosted by your boy Q with insight from gambling expert Lee Sterling. You can find Locked On Bets wherever you get podcasts.